that a lot has changed. When we made the decision to reopen the country, our positivity rate had fallen from 13% in June of this year to 7% in July and to a low of 4% in September. Our COVID bed occupancy had also gone down by 60%. We had flattened the curve to below a 5% positivity rate that is recommended by the World Health Organization. And it is these factors that gave us the courage to reopen and to ease out COVID measures in order to boost our economy. But ladies and gentlemen, 38 days later, it is most unfortunate, but we have, without doubt, experienced a reversal, and a serious one at that. If our COVID bed occupancy had gone down by 60%, giving us the comfort to reopen as we did in September, the occupancy of our COVID beds has now gone up by 140%, and this just during the last 38 days of easing our COVID measures. The COVID positivity rate that we were all very happy and excited about when it dropped to 4% in September has now shot up to an incredible 16% in the month of October. This is 4 times what it was in September. And what does this translate to? What it means is that in September, if one person was positive, in October, it means 4 people have tested positive. That is almost 3 times the rate. And fellow Kenyans, this increase only in 38 days. In October alone, we had over 15,000 new cases of corona infections and approximately 300 deaths. And these statistics coming from our National Multi-Agency Command Center on COVID-19. In fact, October has gone down as the most tragic month in our fight against COVID. We are now staring at a new wave of this pandemic. And the question we must all ask ourselves is, where did we as Kenyans go wrong? And what could we have done differently? Although the second wave of this pandemic, we accept, is a global affair, the last 8 months have taught us a few lessons that are useful in combating this new surge. Firstly, our most successful fight against the virus was recorded after the measures we took on the July 27th, 2020. the very stringent measures saw a new fall in new cases from 4,720 during the first week of July this year to 866 new cases during the second week of September 2020. But when we de-escalated measures in accordance with the wishes of many Kenyans, our cases rose from that 866 low to 6,402 cases by the last week of October 2020. These figures, fellow Kenyans, suggest a correlation between stringent measures and a drop in infections. They suggest that in order to heal our country in the long run, we must and have to make some sacrifices in the short run. The second point is that the last 8 months have taught us also that the exercise of civic responsibility is a central plank in the war against this pandemic. Between June and end of September, the country witnessed a heightened level of public awareness and public restraint. Our country witnessed a high level of observation of COVID protocols, and we were aware and took our civic responsibility seriously. But after de-escalating the measures at the end of September, we as Kenyans seem to have backtracked from the practices that we learned in the early stages of this pandemic. And all of this built around the false notion that because the curve was flattening, the country was now safe and we could go back to normal behavior. And indeed, it was for this very same reason that I warned in my last COVID address that what seems like a victory in September could become a big liability in October. And in fact, this is what has happened. And at the same time, I said that we may win the battle, but lose the overall war if we, as citizens, do not remain vigilant. More so, because again, as I said, the most fragile point in any war happens at the point when victory is in sight. And this is why I emphasized that to win the overall war, the citizens have to exercise their civic duty and responsibility, especially in observing the COVID protocols. The third lesson of the last 8 months has also to do with enforcement. Over this period, it cannot be gainsaid that the public has suffered a certain level of COVID fatigue, for lack of a better word. And with this fatigue, public responsiveness to COVID protocols has also greatly reduced. And this has resulted in the overstretching of enforcement agencies, basically reducing their efficacy and their ability to do their job. But I remind you once again, fellow Kenyans, as I mentioned during my 10th COVID address, that the government does not have the ability to police the morality of its citizens. We will double our enforcement efforts, but it is you, the public, that will play the most critical role. You must remember that it is not my government's desire to close down our economy. We want our country to remain open. But whether or not we will remain open shall ultimately depend on the public's responsiveness to COVID protocols. The fourth, and as I mentioned to the COVID summit today, this moment also provides a unique call to leadership. And although public and civic responsiveness are critical to fighting the rise of COVID numbers, leadership is what will reverse this escalation. And from where I sit, if the public has backslidden from its vigilant fight against the pandemic, this has been occasioned in part by the diminishing stamina on the part of our leaders, and for us, not leading by example. If the nation is succumbing to the fatigue created by the virus, indeed it is a tragedy if the leaders also give in to the weariness as well. And if the people have fallen short of giving their best this time, we as leaders have also fallen short. And we as leaders this time round have no option but to give our all. We must know the way, go the way, and show our people the way. And by leaders here, I refer to those in government like myself. I refer to those in the corporate sector. I refer to the leaders of our religious sector and all sectors of our country. And my call to action is for them to rise to the occasion and for them to help navigate through the uncertainties of this pandemic. And while at it, we must recognize that this is not a time for popular decisions. In order to appease the public, we must choose the bold over the popular if we are truly to serve our people. So therefore, fellow Kenyans, and on the recommendations of the National Security Advisory Committee, the National Emergency Response Committee, and with the concurrence of the 6th Extraordinary Session of the national and county governments, the protocols and guidelines that were previously eased are today reviewed as follows. The first is that today I direct that all cabinet secretaries, chief administrative secretaries, and principal secretaries to scale down all in-person engagements within government and to take appropriate steps to foster the discharge of their mandates by themselves by 9 p.m. 10. In view of the restrictions within the hospitality sector, I further urge all operators of hotels, restaurants, eateries, bars, and other establishments that sell alcohol on wholesale or retail terms to do all that is necessary to ensure enhanced compliance with the Ministry of Health's guidelines and protocols, and those who fail will have their establishments immediately shut down. 11, that the directions governing religious gatherings remain unchanged. Any indoor religious gathering, other than for the purpose of a wedding or a funeral, shall have no more than 1/3 of its normal seating capacity occupied at a given sitting. The Ministry of Health guidelines remain in force. The Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government is hereby directed to ensure strict enforcement, and those who fail to meet those requirements will be stopped from further gatherings. And 12, county governments to maintain isolation facilities in a state of preparedness through continuous capacity building for healthcare workers, provision of adequate PPEs for healthcare workers, and continuous implementation of infection prevention control measures, and the provision of piped or portable oxygen. 13, I want to make it abundantly clear that where there is an upsurge of COVID-19 cases in a specific county, the national government will consult the affected county to issue localized lockdowns and movement restrictions as may be necessary to stem the spread of the disease. 14, county governments and other relevant government agencies to enhance and strictly enforce all public health social measures, including hand washing, social distancing, and mandatory wearing of masks in public places, and to enhance civic responsibility, the national government and county governments have today resolved that going forward, services will not be rendered to anyone who does not abide by the Ministry of Health protocols, and in that regard, I call on the private sector to join the government in the public sensitization campaign dubbed No Mask, No Service. Bila barakoa, hakuna huduma. This applies to markets. This applies to all places where public must continue to conduct service, and as I said, in the spirit of wanting to remain open. But those who fail, we will not hesitate to shut down markets. We will not hesitate to shut down public transport places in order to ensure the health and safety of our citizens. Fellow Kenyans, I want to conclude by emphasizing again that our staying power in the fight against this pandemic should not succumb to COVID fatigue. Both the leaders and the people must not backtrack in their vigilant observation of the health protocols. If public responsiveness to these protocols goes up, then enforcement becomes easy. Finally, I want to once again return to the issue of leadership. Without leadership, enforcement, civic responsiveness to COVID protocols, and all the necessary actions to beat this pandemic will amount to nothing. And that is why today I call on all my fellow leaders to stand out and be counted. And while at it, they must choose to take bold decisions instead of popular decisions, if the latter is good for our people and for our country. Sitaki niseme zaidi ya hayo, isipokuwa tena kusema, wenzangu wa Kenya, huu ugonjwa tuko nao. Pamoja tulitembea hii barabara miezi ya mwanzo kule mwanzoni, mpaka tukafika wakati, kwa sababu serikali na wananchi pamoja tuliweza kutimiza jukumu letu kama wananchi. Tukaweza pamoja kuhakikisha ya kwamba tumefuata sheria ambayo tulikuwa tumepatiwa na wataalamu wetu wa kiafya. Na kwa sababu ya vile tulitembea pamoja, tukaweza kwa muda mchache, kwa sababu tulikuwa tumecontain huu ugonjwa, tukaweza tena sasa kuanza kufungua, kuwezesha Wakenya na nchi yetu kurudi kazini na kuanza tena kufufua uchumi wetu. Lakini wenzangu, wakati tulifanya hivyo, badala ya kuendelea na ile taratibu tulikuwa naye, badala ya kuendelea na ile taratibu ya kujikinga na kukinga wenzako, tukarudi ni kama huu ugonjwa umetuondokea. Vile tuwaongea leo, ni wengi ambao wananiangalia kwa runinga ama wananisikiliza kwa redio, ambao wanajua moja ama mwingine ambaye ameaga kwa sababu ya hii ugonjwa. Na nikisema huu ugonjwa unaendelea kuenea, na waambia kwa uhaki. Kuna wengine wanasema ugonjwa uliisha, ugonjwa hauko, kule hakuna, kule hakuna. Mimi nataka kuambia ni Wakenya, tusichukue uhuru ambao tuko nao, uhuru wa vyombo vya habari, uhuru wa wananchi kuelezwa na viongozi wao wa serikali uhaki wa kile ambacho unaendelea, alafu mujipime na wengine ambao hawaongei ukweli ya yale ambayo yanaendelea katika nchi zao. Uhuru ni kitu cha muhimu. Tuwaeleza kwa uhaki haya ndiyo yanaendelea. Hatufichi. Na hatufichi kwa sababu jukumu la kwanza la serikali ni kuhakikisha tumelinda maisha ya wananchi wetu. Na hatuwezi kufanya hivyo tukiwa hatutawaambieni ukweli. Kwa hivyo tusijilinganishe na mtu yeyote. Tusiseme kule kuko hivi, hapa huko hivi. Hapana. Angalieni ukweli. Na vile nimesema, najua ya kwamba hakuna mmoja wetu ambaye hajui rafiki, dada, mama, mzee ambaye ameangamia kwa sababu ya huu ugonjwa, na ni jukumu letu kuhakikisha ya kwamba tumejilinda na tumelinda wale ambao tunapenda. Na mimi nawaomba kwa heshima kubwa sana Wakenya wenzangu, ya kwamba hatutaki kurudi nyuma, hatutaki kufunga nchi tena, hatutaki uchumi wetu sasa urudi nyuma, hatutaki watu yetu wawe hawana na uwezo wa kwenda kazi na kupata riziki yao ya siku. Na hiyo yote itategemea vile wewe binafsi utafanya na vile wewe mwenyewe utachukua jukumu hiyo yako kibinafsi, kusema ni jukumu langu kuhakikisha ya kwamba nimepambana na huu ugonjwa na nimehakikisha sijapatia mwenzangu, sijapatia bibi yangu, sijapatia watoto wangu, sijapatia mamangu, sijapatia babangu. Na hiyo ni kulingana na vile we mwenyewe utajitunza ndio uweze kutunza wenzako. Na mimi sitaki ni wadanganye, na nilisema hapo katika hiyo speech nimesoma ya kwamba hata sisi kama viongozi tumeanguka mtihani. Tumeanguka mtihani ni kwa sababu hata sisi vile tumekuwa tukijiendesha ni kama hakuna ugonjwa. Mikutano bila barakoa, kulete watu pamoja bila social distancing, na mambo hayo yametuumiza. Na ndipo leo pia na waomba pia viongozi tuongoze kwa mstari wa mbele. Tusiwe watu ambao tunaongea lakini tunatenda mengine, kwa sababu wananchi wanatuangalia. Ni jukumu letu kutenda yale na kufanya yale ambayo tunaambia wananchi wetu wafuate, na tutachukua hatua kwa yeyote ambaye hatafuata yale ambaye tumekubaliana hapa, awe ni nani ama ni nani. Tuasema maisha ya Wakenya kwanza, mambo mengine baadaye. Kwa hivyo Wakenya wenzangu, niwaombe tena nikimalizia, tafadhalini tuje pamoja, tupambane na hii jangwa la corona, tuimalize kati yetu na tuweze kuendelea na shughuli zetu za kikawaida kama Wakenya. Lakini tusipofanya hivyo na huu ugonjwa uendelee kuenea na kuchukua maisha ya wananchi wetu, hatutakuwa na budi isipokuwa kwenda hata zaidi kuweka masharti ambaye itasababisha kila mtu afanye yale ambaye anatakikana. Kwa hivyo nawaomba tufanye kwa hiari yetu, tufanye kwa sababu ya mapenzi ambaye tuko nayo na Wakenya wenzetu. Tusijipende, tusahau tuko na wenzetu. Tujikumbuke kama Wakenya na tutembee barabara hii kama Wakenya na tusaidiane kama Wakenya. Na nyinyi wenzetu waandishi wa habari, yangu ni kuwaomba tusaidieni kuelimisha watu wetu, tusaidieni kutambua yule amekataa kufuata, yule kiongozi expose us, show us out, call us out, even we as leaders, if we fail in doing and practicing that which we preach, because that is the only way we shall save our country. That is the only way we shall deal with this disease. Nasema asanteni sana, na nikimalizia, kwa sababu niko na co-chairman wangu hapa, ningependa aseme jambo moja ama mbili, kwa sababu yeye ndio co-chair wangu wa summit. Karibu Chairman Wycliffe Oparanya, Chairman wa Council of Governors na Governor wa County ya Kakamega. Asanteni.
Ya Mheshimiwa Rais na wale CS wako hapa na mwenzangu Governor wa Machakos, nataka nichukue fursa hii ni kushukuru sana ule uongozi ambao umeonyesha wakati huu ambapo tunapikana na janga la corona. Kwanza wewe umekuwa na sisi kama magovernors mikutano karibu 7 kwa wakati mfupi sana, tukiongea haya mambo ya corona na mambo mengine ambayo imekumba nchi yetu ya Kenya. Na hiyo tunakushukuru, na yale yote ambayo umetangaza leo, sisi kama magovernors tunakuunga mkono, tumekubaliana, kwa sababu hatutaki watu wetu kukufa kwa sababu ya hii ugonjwa wa corona. So, Your Excellency, we shall continue supporting you on this particular issue. We are committed to it, and we continue to plead to all other Kenyans to be careful, to take care of themselves, and also to take care of others as we move forward as a country. Asanteni.